Right, guys, welcome back. The Five Insider. We're here with Mr. David Ornstein, the insider of insiders. We're here to go, man. I've got loads of questions for you. The transfer window's opened up. I want to hear what you've got to say and what you've got to spill the beans, man. What's going on? How you doing, bro?
I'm good. Good New Year myself. It's been a decent Christmas period. A lot of football, a lot of family, a lot of fun. And now let's get down to business, Rio.
No, definitely. I was going to come in and straight away talk about Manchester United and the new ownership. But as we were coming on, the news has just broke about Wayne Rooney getting the sack at Birmingham City. What's your take, if any?
Ultimately, you got to deliver, and time is in short supply. There's no real patience in the managerial world, as the statistics show. And Derby, the circumstances were tough, but he did enough there to make you think that there's some real potential. DC United, maybe it was a move that he felt was right for him at that time, professionally, personally, and the jury was maybe still out. And so this was the chance to really show England and British football again that he's on the right path. And unfortunately, he was on the back foot immediately because John Eustace had done a good job. He got them pretty much into the playoff positions. He was a popular figure. But
it was manager of the month, I think, that month, wasn't he, as well?
Yeah, and he, they were looking seriously competitive. Not everything was perfect, and it seems that the relationship with maybe Gary Cook and the new hierarchy at Birmingham wasn't all that they wanted it to be. There was this perception, though, that they wanted like a star name to front this Tom Brady revolution at Birmingham. They've done a lot of good work off the pitch, and that continues. But really, results started to take a dive straight away, and Wayne will feel that he needed more time. He's actually released in the last half hour or so before we record this quite an interesting statement, because normally they all just toe the party line or wait for the LMA once the financial settlement is done to release a statement, and everybody's being complimentary of each other. In this one, he does thank those above him, but he says time is the most precious commodity in this industry, and to have just 13 weeks at the helm didn't give him the opportunity to make the changes that he felt were necessary. And he says that he's going to go away and take some real time himself to spend quality time with his family and sort of reassess where he goes next, the next opportunity that may or may not arise. And so I think he's wounded by this, and it's a chastening experience for the club too, because they might have these grand plans and sort of images of where they want to go. But right now they need to get themselves out of relegation trouble in the Championship and then try and build upwardly. And John Eustace is still, I presume, being paid by Birmingham as part of the settlement and his staff. So would he come back? The immediate noises are that maybe he would be up for it, but there would need to be changes in some personnel. They'll be looking at other candidates. Would they go back down that road? But this Rooney experiment, whatever side you sit on it, whether you think this is rash, whether you think that, he deserved longer, it's not gone well. It's been a failure. And for all parties, they'll need to sort of reassess and go again. Not a good mark on Rooney's career, of course. And also, you look at the former Sir Alex Ferguson players who have gone into management and they found it tough. Maybe Steve Bruce is the biggest success story, but of this younger generation, maybe they should focus more on the line of work that you're doing, because I think, listen, David, it's not an easy industry.
It's definitely stress. The stresses levels are very different. I'm bouncing into games. I'm bouncing out of games. You know what I mean? I'm a fan again. But these guys, obviously, they want to kind of get a career in the game as a manager or as coaches, and it's difficult, man. I think one of the key kind of words that he used in there was time. That managers that are not afforded 13 weeks at Wayne feels isn't long enough to be able to really put his stamp on a team. I understand that, but I think we all know. I think Wayne's not silly. He understands it is results driven, and when you look at on the sheet on the facts of it, it's 2 wins in 15 games. And when he took over, they were 6th, and now they're 20th. I think a win percentage of 13%. It's like, that is damning. But I think with the conversations that he's probably had behind the scenes when he went in there, and probably in a couple of weeks ago, 3-4 weeks ago, I think he would have been feeling positive that regardless of results, as long as he stays up, he'll probably get time. And that hasn't been the way it is. And I think I've seen little clips on social media of the Birmingham fans at games, disgruntled, not happy. with the way things have gone. And I think I always thought at the beginning, I spoke to Wayne when he got the job on the phone, and I always thought, and I said this to him at the time, it's a difficult time to go into a club when actually their towels are up, when they're actually doing well, when they actually like the manager. The fans have got a good rapport with the manager, it seemed. The players seem to like the manager or playing for him. To go in there, where normally in 9 times out of 10, if not all the time, a manager replaces somebody who's not doing well. And it makes it a lot easier because there's a lot of players with noses out of the joint who are waiting for someone to come in to go and impress that new guy. This was a very different scenario. And I think he back against the wall was from immediately when he walked through the doors there.
Definitely. And I think, and also I think, many people say this was a long time in coming. Behind the scenes, there were murmurings about Wayne Rooney in Birmingham for months, and the pieces were being put in place. But in reality, it was quite a quick transition. DC United out, Birmingham in. And how much real planning can you do in one of the most competitive and sort of ferociously contested leagues in world football, in terms of getting to know the players, the environment, those that you're going to be working around? And their ambition is such that if you don't deliver, you're going to go. And I think his next step is going to be so important during the process. And you can see the toll it takes on these guys, the intensity, the amount of things that they're taking on and trying to juggle when you're running a football team, a club, with fixture, and all the politics around it all. It's easier said than done. And when you look at some of the ex-players who are really attacking the managerial world and trying to make a career of it, it's just not easy at all. And I saw interviews with Sol Campbell recently where he said, I've tried everything now. I'm basically giving up on managerial life and going into something else. And where does Wayne Rooney go next? Does he start lower and think really carefully about a project?
You've got to come on TNT. Come on to TNT and chill out a little bit. Do you know what I mean? Relax.
But that's it. The stress that it puts these guys through. And if not, everyone is on board, and you have the project and you have the environment and you have the plans, and people are ready to be patient, even if results take a dip, because clearly there's some disconnect here. Because if they were with him for the long term, whatever happened, then that hasn't manifested itself further down the line. So I think his next step is a massive decision. And when he says he's going to take time out with his family, you don't blame him at all, because this is a grueling, draining industry, and it's eating up and chewing more, players, ex-players, aspiring managers than you can imagine. And you do take your hat off to those who have made a success of the lower leagues and even at the top level, because it's clearly incredibly difficult.
It leads me to kind of think I've been thinking about it. So what are the ingredients that make good managers nowadays, especially ex-players? Because I don't know, I think more now than ever, you have to be almost like a social worker. You almost have to be like somebody that can deal with people, somebody that can really deal with humans, because these players now have never been more powerful than they are now. And they have opinions, they have voices, they have platforms now that are bigger than some clubs. Yeah. And so the way in which you handle these players is so more important now than I've ever seen it before. Yeah. We could just, even with the situation Jadon Sancho, for example, not happy, we'll sit it out. Not apologising, whether you think he's right or wrong, but that's just the facts of the matter. Is been asked to apologise, won't apologise, we'll just sit it out. These guys are on so much money, they have so much power, they can afford to do these things. Whereas before, it was the working man's game, and then obviously that forwarded it to my generation. It became very detached from working man's because of the sums of money that was involved. But you still felt there was a sense of that connection with the real man still there. Whereas now, I think you're dealing with players. Add to that social media, add to that the vast sums of money. You've got different animals you're dealing with now, and I think you have to deal with them in a much different way. And I think you look at some of the most successful managers at this time, the way in which that they manage and the way in which they deal with players individually, but with the collective, and they get people on side and they build a storyboard almost and a vision, and building that all around it with words and wisdom but you need the results to go alongside that. There's no story you give anybody without the results. It's not compelling. It doesn't work. It doesn't cross over. But I don't know. It's difficult. I think you've got to be able to really be a people person at heart as well to get the best out of these players.
Without doubt, it's a minefield, and you don't envy those who go into it. I think the shining examples at the top level is somebody like Pep Guardiola, but he gets put through the ringer. We've read and seen so much about how he dedicates his life to it and the toll it takes on him physically and mentally. And that's somebody working at the biggest clubs with lavish resources. I really admire Jurgen Klopp, even in this season that was meant to be of transition. He's still getting performances out. He's clearly a very tactile manager with his players, but gets the balance right between being tough as well. I'm sure it's not always the easiest environment for people to work around, but some magic is created, but that's at the top level. If you're looking further down to the likes of Wayne and that level, the only thing I can say as an observer and from speaking to people in the industry is that you really need to do your time, your coaching courses, your preparation, your building of coaching staff, of analysts, of medics, and studying the squad inside out, who they are, what they're about, whether you can bring players in and add to it, and getting to know those executives, the owners that might be appointing you, almost like doing your due diligence on a club. Because in your day, Sir Alex Ferguson was the king of Manchester United. No player was paid more than him, and you knew who was the boss. You know it at Man City, you know it at Liverpool in those examples. But it's fewer and far between now, where it seems like players can eat up the managers, subconsciously or consciously, and you wonder what would have happened with Erik ten Hag given his results and his record based on what previous managers have done since Sir Alex Ferguson and how it's ended, if it wasn't for the ownership uncertainty and the change and the Ineos arrival and the need for them to approve everything before decisions are made. Maybe that's brought him a bit of a stay of execution. And like, it's a thankless task, and it seems to be getting harder because the stakes are higher in every league. Patience is getting lower, and so it's an ever more sort of hazardous environment. And the world of social media, the fans coming down on you, the pressure now building on, well, from sections of the outside world on Eddie Howe when results turn against him. I mean, this is a club that was languishing, Newcastle United, and relegated to the Championship, back up, relegated again. Suddenly, in rapid fire time, he's led them in 2 years of what was probably meant to be a 5-year project into the Champions League, the hardest group in the Champions League. It didn't go well, and suddenly there's questions about him, and so, you know,
you mentioned David, you mentioned their ownership, which is a nice segue, I think, into Manchester United. Can you just give us a little bit of background on the new takeover and what that means, and critically for the fans, what does that mean in terms of spending power or the ability to spend for Manchester United in this next window? Because that could be critical.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ineos has finally been announced in terms of their 25% investment. It seemed to be dragging on for ages, and there were rumours that it was going to go in different directions. But I think this was always the recent sort of pathway that was just a matter of when, not if, it was going to be announced. And there's all sorts of complications that explain that delay, which was hard to keep saying to people when the announcement was never coming. But, you know, you've got a club in Manchester United who are based in the UK. They are registered in the Cayman Islands. They are listed on the New York Stock Exchange. There are multiple Glazer siblings who all have their different agendas and preferences. There are all these different shareholders of A and B shares in the case of the Glazers, who want their sort of desires met, and there's threats of legal action, and when lawyers are involved it takes time. But finally on Christmas Eve, we got there, and part of the agreement, and we've seen the small print come out now, so we've learned a lot more about this situation, is that they have sporting control.
What does that mean, though? What does that mean, David, sporting control?
Yeah, so there was this perception that it was going to be a 3-person panel in the build-up that would have been Joel Glazer, Sir Jim Radcliffe and Sir Dave Brailsford. But it seems that in the final agreement, it's going to be total sporting control to Ineos. And I guess that just means that the board of directors has delegated Ineos to run all football matters. Now, you're right. What does that mean? Because they still have as it shakes up, maybe like 50% of the club, because obviously Ineos are also investing $200 million in infrastructure, but it can be used for something else. That buys them more shares. So as it's not that the Glazers have 75% now, it's more like 50%, but they're in control of the rest of the club, the commercial side, etc. And I think they're essentially saying, you come up with the sporting plan, the recruitment ideas based on an agreed budget with the board of directors. Of course, they'll have two members on that football board, Jean-Claude Blanc and Sir Dave Brailsford, and then two other members on the PLC board. So they'll have influence there. And yeah, budgets will need to be set based on what they can do, crucially with profit and sustainability rules, PSR as it's being known now, financial fair play. And you get to decide the targets. You get to make the decisions on contract renewals within the confines of those financial restrictions.
So are they doing the current ones we're hearing about now, like Raphael, Varane, Martial, Lindelof? Are they the ones deciding on those, or is it the people that are already in place at the moment?
So there was a plan in place that we now know from the small print had to be sort of relayed to Ineos ahead of the agreement being signed and sealed. And if any changes are made to that plan now, it has to be in conjunction with Ineos. It requires their approval. And Dave Brailsford is now working at the club. He's been into Carrington this week. I don't know where he'll be, fully, because they've still got Nice, of course, and he's been based in Monaco. There's reports that Sir Jim Radcliffe is going to be here this week. And so the plan would have been like business as usual. John Murtagh as football director, Darren Fletcher as technical director. There's a recruitment team there. You've got Andy O'Boyle as deputy to John Murtagh. You have Matt Hargreaves as the contract negotiator. They will have formed this plan based on the financial limitations. And as we know it, it's for one or two loans, possibly, unless they can shift some players out. And in terms of potential outs, so you've got the story that I broke on Anthony Martial. He's under contract until the summer of 2024 with an option to extend. Manchester United, as I understand it, don't intend to activate that extension. And therefore, this would be the last opportunity to sell him for some money. And they would be open to that. And that would be a decision taken by the previous regime, keeping Ineos informed prior to the agreement, of course. Similar with Raphael Varane reports, Daily Mail, it was Matt Hughes saying that they're not intending to activate his option to extend past 2024 to 2025, and that they might look to try and renegotiate a contract with him on reduced terms, or if there are credible offers that come in for him, make a sale. Similar with Jadon Sancho, something has to give on this. And the existing regime will have had their thoughts on that, which essentially would have been, if he's going to provide the apology that's to Erik ten Hag's satisfaction, then maybe he can be reintegrated. If not, then we need to try and find a loan or a sale. But really, if they're going to get rid of Jadon Sancho, they need some proper money for him, because the cost of him on this contract that he's on will remain on United's books in some way, shape or form, whether you call it amortization or impairment. And that is really costly. It's almost like more costly if Jadon Sancho goes. And they have ongoing
They've made
cost.
this mistake before, haven't they? Because they've done that with Lukaku, with Sanchez. They've done this with players like multiple players.
Yeah, so if he goes and you've still got the ongoing cost and you bring somebody else in to replace the absence of Jadon Sancho, that's a double cost. It might not comply with their financial fair play. So really you need to either reintegrate him and use him to the effect of this asset, or get rid of him for decent money. There has been some talk of paying off his contract. I don't know, so I don't want to say one way or the other, whether United would be able to do that under financial fair play. So anyway, to answer your question, those are three key players and this one or two loans idea that would have been part of the existing plans. Now that they're all together with Ineos, they're going to have to try and strategize whether they can do some more. I don't think the finances allow them to do much more, but if they can shift some players out, I understand there's loan interest in Pellistri, for example, from Nice, among a number of clubs, but that doesn't do a great deal for the finances, but it creates a bit of space in the squad. So I don't think January is a month that much can happen, especially because Ineos, while the Premier League owners and directors test is ongoing, they've got power to influence, but not to execute before they've got full approval. And so I suspect January is going to be relatively quiet month, and then they would look to do some proper business in the summer. There have been some reports, I think it was Duncan Castles in the Sunday Times, saying that under the terms of owner investment into a club, which hasn't happened at Manchester United under the Glazers, when an owner invests, your allowable losses under financial fair play rules extends from a relatively small amount to that £105 million that we know all about with Everton. So maybe if Ineos are coming in and putting in this $200 million for stadium infrastructure or other stuff, that will help their financial fair play picture to be able to spend more in allowable losses this summer. But that's the summer and it's not now. And so they're in a very delicate position for the January window. And look, of course, they would want to do more in the market. There, for example, is a desire to add another centre forward because, of course, it was just Højlund who came in the summer. And despite the price, he's a young player and he was seen as a development recruit, somebody that can flourish in the long term. So they would love to add more in that area, but maybe it takes a departure such as a Martial or a Sancho. And then a right centre-back is also on the agenda, but it would be contingent on somebody like Varane, for instance, leaving. And that's not a foregone conclusion. So there are recruitment plans in place and no doubt they will mature in time. I would absolutely expect that they're getting on with conversations in the background. It's not like their recruitment team won't be exploring possibilities, but I guess it's all kind of on hold until there's more clarity on exactly how they're going to work with Ineos and what they're able to do. And that's where Dave Brailsford will have a huge impact because he's said to be studying everything, looking, listening, learning on how they work. And I would expect in time to see some pretty significant changes on and off the pitch as he tries to bring Manchester United slowly but surely back to the levels that they would expect to be at.
So just to go backwards, Jean-Claude Blanc, he's going to be coming in as well, yeah? He's definitely coming in.
That's the proposal, that he will take one of two seats on the football board alongside Sir Dave Brailsford. And he's a vastly experienced executive who worked at Juventus and PSG.
He really interests me. I've done a little bit of reading on him and he's worked in different areas of the game. He's a Harvard graduate, so he's obviously intelligent, but he's worked in different sports like tennis with the French Association.
That's right.
With the Winter Olympics, I think, with the skiing and stuff. And then obviously with Nice, running sporting projects with Ineos. So he's done some really kind of interesting stuff. He worked at Juventus and PSG. And I think what's interesting about Juventus, especially, is that how he tried to modernize that club and bring them forward with a new stadium, but also with handling transfers. And he actually, to be fair to him, he didn't really do too well results-wise when he went and handled all the football stuff. But he really kind of brought the club into the new age with a new stadium and the way that they were kind of reset. And the same with PSG, in that he was tasked with modernizing that club and bringing them to the forefront in the digital world that we're living in now. And I think it's quite interesting that he said, we can't compete with the Man Uniteds, the Real Madrids, the Barcelonas of this world. And I think it's quite interesting how he said that, but he said we could be different and we could bring something else to the table. And I think the way that they've brought PSG to the forefront, I think even with deals like doing the Jordan brand deal, like they're deals that we've never seen before and have made them now a fashion house almost rather than, so this is outside of football, but even on the football pitch, they've become competitive in the European grand scheme of things on the big stage. They've not won the Champions League yet, but they've got to positions where you feel, well, they're competing now. But I think his journey really interests me, that someone like him can come in and has a real understanding of building football clubs, modernizing football clubs, and really having the making key changes for development in the backgrounds. And I think Man United are in a position where they need that experience now to really propel us forward rather than for us to be sitting there waiting to see what happens.
Yeah, that will be really welcome for Man United. And if you think back to the last two chief executives, or whatever the exact title was, Richard Arnold was very much from a commercial background and he did well there for Manchester United, but it didn't go so well on the football side. There was obviously most notably the Mason Greenwood situation that he was handling. And then he decided to go. Just back to your point on Jean-Claude Blanc, not only was it Richard Arnold, but Ed Woodward before him. And he was very much a commercial man and did well on the commercial side before really having a difficult time of it on the football side and really took a lot of the fans' ire. So we don't know what title Jean-Claude Blanc will be given, but the reputation that you talk about is very similar to what I've heard. Now, these guys aren't magicians. They're not the silver bullet and the cure of all ills. But when I talk to people in football that I trust, that know him, that have seen him operate, they do speak extremely highly of him. And when you talk about those areas on the commercial side and on the football side too, there are a number of executives that are just nailing this wherever they're working, and he seems to be one of them. And yeah, Man United's revenues through their commercial side are still really strong, but imagine how much better they could be even if they were a successful football side. They could blow most of these clubs that are now surpassing them, like Manchester City and others, out of the water if they got things right. There's still untapped potential there. There's stadium and infrastructural development that somebody like him would presumably be able to impact positively. So that's one potential appointment that seems to be really key in this, and he's maybe the kingpin in the Ineos offering because Sir Dave Brailsford has limited football experience. He's obviously worked at Nice, and they've got Lausanne within the group, and he's overseen the cycling at Ineos, Team Sky previously, British Cycling, and he would have had input on the America's Cup sailing and things like that. But he's still relatively new to football, so he's going to be listening to people. He will, I'm sure, make appointments. You've seen a number of high-profile sporting directors linked with Manchester United, and that shows that Ineos, they haven't operated at this level of football before, but Jean-Claude Blanc has, and so he'll be seen, I'm sure, as a massive asset.
I always think about the advertising and the commercialisation of Manchester United. It must be the easiest gig in the world. The badge speaks for itself. It's like walking in and trying to sell Apple to people. It just happens. It's just easy. Do you know what I mean? Unless you're talking to your rivals, your arch rivals like Liverpool, Man City. Everyone else is an open door. You're a shoe-in to get in through the door before anything. You haven't got to say a word. So that part of it, so I've always found, like, you could bring anyone in who's got a bit of a commercial background and they do numbers for Manchester United because of the beast that it is. It's the development, like you say, the infrastructure and the running of the football club as a football club is the important part, and future-proofing a lot of areas in the club.
And that has the ramification of, when the revenues are strong, and even stronger, of improving the financial fair play situation, because we know with all of these clubs now, you can only spend what you earn. You need to increase your revenues through sponsorships, commercials, and then you need to spend it properly. United clearly have not performed best in class in the football area, in the recruitment world. They have always been strong in the commercial world. So if one needs to be brought up to scratch, it's the football side, and that ultimately answers your main point of the sporting operation, and that's what they'll be charged with doing. And the Glazers, whether you like it or not, can sit there and say, well, if they bring the sporting side up to scratch, then we benefit as a whole.
This is a great operation.
Deal. And if they don't, then we'll say that they got it wrong, and on we go.
I think this is an unbelievable deal again from the Glazers for them personally. They've managed to get money. They've managed to get money for 25% of the club, and they're betting on the value being raised again because of the professionalism and the caliber of Ineos coming in. If once they raise that and the infrastructure of the club goes up again, the value will go up. Never mind if they start winning again. The Man United start winning again. If they were asking for $4 billion yesterday, before this deal was done, they could potentially, with Man United are winning, the infrastructure's right, they could be asking for $6-7 billion. So for them, it's an unbelievable deal.
And they know the way that football is growing. We've got the expanded Club World Cup. We've got the World Cup in the States in 2026. We've got TV deals that are internationally, anyway, for the Premier League going through the roof. Even the domestic one has taken a slight boost when other leagues are actually decreasing in broadcast revenue value. So again, it won't be a popular thing to say, but the Glazers are extremely successful and shrewd business people, and they're not going to turn away from something that isn't right for them. A lot of people are saying, how much do you want? You could have got 4 billion. Why do you have to hold out for 6 billion? Because if they think the value is 6 billion and they don't need to listen to the public, opinion, and they're immune to it. You know, they're in the States. They've clearly got a very thick skin. They've never been affected.
They don't feel nothing.
They've never been affected by the protests or anything, and so this was always a very plausible direction of travel, and it appears it will continue. However, be in no doubt that Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Ineos want to complete a full takeover of Manchester United. They want to be in total control, and they see this as a foot in the door and the start of the journey to get there. And I think that should give United fans a lot of optimism, because it's not like, oh, it's only 25%. That was all they could get under the current circumstances. The $200 million investment is the beginning of their investment, I would assume. And so I think that in their eyes, it is a pathway. But again, me referring back to the small print, after 18 months, the Glazers, if a suitable offer in their eyes comes in to sell, they can sell the club in its entirety and force the minority shareholder, Ineos, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, to go along with it as part of like a pull. It is being described as like forcing of a sale. So that will be interesting in the future. But Sir Jim Ratcliffe's intentions are clear. He wants to be the complete owner of Manchester United in the future.
Good. But just briefly moving on now, there's other people that I think there could be some activity in this window.
Yeah.
Chelsea obviously done almost $1 billion in the window's gone. How active are they going to be? And have you got any names for us? Also City and Liverpool, maybe, with Salah going away, Endo going away.
Yeah, I'll take them in that order then. Chelsea, of course, they're still on this journey to complete what the new ownership feel to be a competitive squad, and much better than they are now. And, you know, I think their intention is to be judged at the end of the next summer window. So like September the 1st. And some will say, you know, we've already had long enough to judge them, but that they are a couple of windows into what I think they see as being a 4-window recruitment plan led by their sporting directors, Paul Winstanley and Lawrence Stewart, and supported by the ownership of Todd Bowley and Badad Eghbali on behalf of Clear Lake Capital. And Mauricio Pochettino will, of course, have input into that. I've said on a number of occasions, I don't think he'll have sort of increased power where everybody's saying, oh, he's going to be in charge and he will make all the decisions. It's a collective thing. And in this particular window, I think they're obviously looking and active, but you would expect a forward to come in either January or the summer. Not inconceivable that they strike a January agreement for a player to arrive in the summer. And that may be a number 9. Many people have said Victor Osimhen, that won't be happening in this January window. But it may also turn out to be a versatile attacker, because they do need more goals. It's just not clear exactly yet what that will be. And then in the defensive department, in the summer, Thiago Silva is going to be out of contract, and they're not expected to renew that deal. So they'll be looking to bring in that position. They've been linked just in recent days with Jean-Claire Todibo, who hasn't, from Nice. But that's not one I expect to be happening in the January window for Chelsea, nor for Tottenham, which we may come on to talk about later. Manchester United have been linked with him as well, but we talked about needing the outgoings. So yeah, that attacker and some defensive reinforcement is going to come. We just don't know whether it be now or 6 months down the line. There could be some outgoings, of course. You know, we've seen the likes of Chalobah, who's not playing, and there's interest in him from around. Could
Gallagher go? I can't believe
that's
this.
one that I was going to come on to talk about. Really interesting situation, and many people sort of react incredulously to this, but we've got to look at it quite clinically, whether supporters like it or not. He's out of contract in the summer of 2025. Chelsea, like many clubs, are taking this stance of you need to sign a new deal or we're going to have to trade you. There's no sense that a new deal is close at this point in time, which would bring him to the point of 12 months to go in the summer if a deal can't be struck. So if credible offers come in for him at the level that Chelsea's owners would expect, I don't know, maybe £60 million or thereabouts, then of course they're going to consider it, and they know that he represents pure profit on the books in terms of financial fair play. And also, they are well stocked in that area. They've got a sort of, not an embarrassment of riches, but they've got plenty in terms of Moises Caicedo, Enzo Fernandez, Carney Chukwuemeka, Leslie Ugochukwu, and so it's not like Conor Gallagher is the only player in there where he would be in other positions. He's played fantastically. Everything I hear is that
their best player in there.
Yeah, he's been great. The manager obviously loves him. I hear the hierarchy can't fault him as a player or professional, but sometimes this does come down to economics. Maybe they'll have something to think about in January, but maybe they won't. It depends what comes forward. People have rightly pointed out that Tottenham retain an interest in him. They tried to sign him in the summer window. They may come back again, but to go to that level that I mentioned, around 60 million, Tottenham are going to need to shift some significant players to raise the money for it. And then where else do you look? Newcastle have been linked in the past, but their financial fair play situation makes that tricky. Everton, I don't think Conor Gallagher wanted to go there in the past and couldn't see it, even if they could pay for it. So it's just one definitely to watch. You said Manchester City. My expectation right now is no senior signings. Again, never say never, because things do change, but that's the current status quo. Obviously, that leaves scope for non-senior signings, and we've seen that a deal for Claudio Echeverri, the River Plate attacking midfielder who shone at the Under-17 World Cup. He's 17 years old. It seems that he would stay there on loan, not too dissimilar to the Julian Alvarez situation, and that would be another really shrewd piece of young business for Manchester City. Did you say Liverpool? So Liverpool always very attentive to the market. They're shrewd. You would almost like not be surprised anymore to be surprised by them doing something, because they often pull a rabbit out of the hat. But I think they did most of their business in the summer. They wanted to rebuild their midfield. They did so really impressively with McAllister and Endo and Szoboszlai and Gravenberch adding to the attacker that they bought in last January, which was a little bit of a surprise in Cody Gakpo, and they look pretty strong. I think, if opportunities arise, maybe, but I'm not hearing anything that Liverpool are dead set to bring in players right now. They obviously do lose Salah, but it might not be for a massive amount of games, given that there's the winter break as well. And then no doubt we'll all be talking about Salah in the summer if he doesn't sign a new contract and if the Saudi Pro League come in for him again. So, yeah, on those three teams.
What about Arsenal? Joel Bale will be asking me to ask you about Arsenal as well. I mean, Ivan Toney. I don't think Ivan Toney will go in this window, because I think they lose two attacking players to the AFCON. I think, if I'm right there, and there's other players, obviously Dominic Solanke as well, who's doing really well. But I think their first choice will be Toney, unless you correct me otherwise.
Well, look, Ivan Toney is admired by some inside Arsenal, like he is a number of clubs, but that doesn't translate into a transfer. The first thing we should say, and the freshest thing, is that Brentford are in a really difficult position. They've lost their last 5 matches in a row. Brian Mbeumo is out for a number of months. He's had surgery. Yohan Wissa is going to the AFCON. And so they need him now more than ever. He's due to return from his gambling suspension on the 16th of January. The first fixture that he's available for is the 22nd of January against Nottingham Forest. He's been training really well by all accounts, and I see them reintegrating him. Let's see how he does on the pitch. If he starts to fly and other clubs are really struggling, then maybe there'll be a bit of panic, a bit of a late reactive move to test the resolve of Brentford. But I think it's more likely that he stays in January. Maybe he could leave in the summer, and don't completely discount that he goes as a free agent in the summer of 2025. Brentford would like to renew his contract, but I don't think they're going to be able to afford the sort of salary expectation that he would want at this point in time. In terms of Arsenal, when they get money and they're in a position to be able to spend, because of course their financial fair play situation is tight, which we know from the fact that David Raya, their most recent signing, had to be structured as a loan with an option to buy. The money will need to go on him, 20+ million, to convert that into a permanent. If you're then going to go for Ivan Toney, which Brentford, if they're going to have their resolve tested, I think they would expect around £100 million to come in. Is that going to be Arsenal in January? Right now, I just can't see it at all. And Arsenal also have other concerns in their team too. And, let's see how long Thomas Partey's out for. I don't think a departure would be expected now. Jorginho then becomes more important when he's fit, depending on how long Thomas Partey's out for. So you wouldn't expect him to leave before the summer when his contract ends, unless they take the option to extend it. So it would need a departure from the midfield really to bring somebody in. And we know they love Martin Zubimendi from Real Sociedad. They looked into signing him last January. He has a release clause that's not extortionate for a really good player. But he wanted to stay. He stayed until the summer, and you've seen how things have worked out. Real Sociedad are in the Champions League knockout stages, and so I don't see that one sort of I don't hear of that progressing for now. And then you look into the back line. I don't know, maybe a loan. I've heard some suggestions, possibly strengthening at left back, but that might not come until the summer because Arsenal are already short on numbers. So, they need to get the players they have fit. And then if you could bring something in on a short-term basis, it's not beyond the realms of possibility. I think for Arsenal to be able to operate and do some business in January, you need to be looking at some departures. Aaron Ramsdale springs to mind immediately. Can his situation continue when he wants to be in the England frame for the Euros? He's not playing at Arsenal. He's lost his place. I'm sure many clubs like him, but many of those clubs would want to do a loan. Arsenal won't countenance a loan, I don't think, because it wouldn't suit them at all. They would have to bring in a suitable replacement. They're not just going to give him what he wants. It needs to suit them as well. And so will a substantial financial offer come in for him or anybody else? We've seen Eddie Nketiah linked with a move away, and there is interest in him from elsewhere. Sami Mokbel in the Mail rightly reported that Crystal Palace still like him. But, he started at Fulham in Arsenal's last game. So I think they see him being a part of their plans. If he is to go, they would need to bring somebody else in. So right now, again, I don't want to sort of disappoint people looking at this, but there's nothing sort of actively developing on the Arsenal front. I think they need to take this sort of break coming up. I know they've got the Liverpool FA Cup match to sort of get players fit and get their sort of form with their existing players back together, and then focus on recruiting properly again in the summer.
Well, lastly for me, David, I saw reports about Kylian Mbappe. He's now able to talk to potential suitors now. Have you got any numbers that are being bandied about? And obviously Real Madrid at the front of the queue, it seems, if we're to believe what we're reading.
Well, numbers-wise, there's no possibility of him leaving in January, to our knowledge. So there wouldn't be a transfer fee if he signs a pre-contract agreement with.
His numbers.
Oh, his. Well, you mean his salary?
Yeah.
Crazy, of course. And there are very few clubs that will be able to pay that. My colleague Mario, who works for The Athletic, he reported recently that there's expected to be a Real Madrid push for him. I think there was a deadline. You'll have to read the report for full details, but it still wouldn't surprise you if something materialised with Real Madrid, who can of course shoulder his salary. And then there are clubs in the Premier League who could, I don't know, a Manchester City, a Manchester United, whoever. But all of them are trying to bring their wage bills down. So what Kylian Mbappe earns possibly can only really be paid at PSG, maybe Real Madrid. And we see Liverpool linked with him. I don't know of credibility to those suggestions. Everybody
Liverpool
likes him, of course.
Liverpool can't pay that.
No, and Chelsea were linked in the past. If this guy's available, everybody's going to have an interest in him. But again, it doesn't translate into a signing. And look, PSG are really relaxed about the situation from what I know. If he continues with them and he wants to re-sign, then they'll do it gladly. But they're also building this young, largely French squad that they feel is moving away from this sort of Galactico model that had obviously Neymar and Messi too. And they're really optimistic about how things are going. In fact, this sideshow with Mbappe that crops up every window, I think PSG wouldn't be too displeased if it went away. But equally, if he stays and wants to be part of this new generation, then they can afford it and they would gladly do it. So it's not decided yet. And the power is coming into Kylian Mbappe's hands, because he can reach a pre-contract agreement with the foreign club this month, and then he could leave as a free agent in the summer. So no doubt we'll just keep talking about it. But yeah, the numbers will be eye-watering, and that will affect a large amount of who's able to get him, if anyone does.
David, what about Spurs? They've had a lot of injuries. I'm sure they're going to be active in this window.
Yeah, they are expected to be one of the more active clubs. Again, it doesn't guarantee that they'll do loads in the end, but they are looking, no doubt about it. Like with many clubs, there's not a great deal of resource there financially, so they're going to have to be creative, is the impression we're getting. So they would like players to go. Hugo Lloris has already gone to LAFC. That doesn't bring in a transfer fee, but it moves his salary off the wage bill, which is crucial in this financial fair play era. They would very gladly do the same with Eric Dyer, who's out of contract next summer and is not part of the plans. And also Pierre-Emile Højbjerg, who might generate a transfer fee for them, and that could be crucial. There is expected to be interest from him in the Premier League and elsewhere. In the meantime, they're getting on with their recruitment plans. So a centre-back is top of the agenda. And Radu Dragusin of Genoa in Serie A is one of the options they're looking at, and they're exploring a possible deal for him. Let's see developments on that. Jean-Claire Todibo has been heavily linked, but I've said throughout, I don't expect that one necessarily to happen, despite the fact that there's clearly a bit of interest there. And beyond that will depend on where they're able to maneuver financially. So a midfielder, we've talked about Conor Gallagher and that interest already, and they'll have other options too. And maybe a wide attacker or an attacker to bolster their resources around there. But it's all contingent on the financial situation. So yeah, Tottenham is definitely one that we should be paying attention to.
All right, listen, David, I really appreciate your time. I know we're all sitting here. It's crackers, cheese, pickles, ham day for me in my house. I don't know what it is in yours, but I'm going to get back to that as soon as I can. Thank you, man.
An absolute pleasure anytime.